Hello and welcome to this Getting Started video series. This series is meant to help you get started on your recovery journey. Today we're going to be talking about step 5. So let's look at step 5 together right now. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So at this point we have our inventory done, and so we're ready to move on to the next step. Taking a moral inventory was hard, and it took courage and it took honesty. And step 5, it takes that as well. We come to step 5 ready to share with God, to confess to ourselves and to another person our inventories. Now, one of the obstacles that people immediately come up with in this step is fear. And that really is fear of rejection, fear of judgment. When you think about sharing it with God, it's not quite as scary because most of us believe God already knows all of this. Thinking about sharing it with yourself, that's a little weird or awkward, or maybe a new idea for you to share and address yourself. But I think the one that most people have the most fear around is sharing their inventory with another person. Now, hopefully by this point, you're connected with a person in recovery that you've developed a level of trust with. Maybe that's a sponsor or an accountability partner or somebody else in your recovery group. At this point, that's the person that you want to select to share your inventory with. The point of this step is for you to take all of that stuff from your past, whether it's stuff that was done to you or stuff that you've done to somebody else, and it's to ultimately confess it out loud, to take it and share it with another person. Now, when I first started working through the 12 steps, I was really scared and cautious of this step. The reason for that was because I had things I'd never shared with anyone before. And I justified in my mind that since God already knew, I didn't need to. But yet when I got to this step, to actively work this step, I knew I had to, or else how would I know if the 12 steps actually worked, if I wasn't really working them? So I went into my 5th step meeting with my sponsor, scared to death and still kind of questioning whether or not I was actually going to share everything. But that day I got a burst of courage in the moment, and I did. I laid it all out before her, got it all out, and I halfway expected that she'd probably never look at me the same way again, that she probably would judge me. All of that fear was still right there. But I was surprised because she actually could empathize with a lot of the things that I'd been through. Some of those things she had been through as well. And at the end of it, she loved me, she accepted me, she encouraged me, and she told me how proud she was of me for having the courage and the boldness to share so honestly and so vulnerably. And she didn't look at me differently. She didn't look at me as less than. She didn't judge me. She didn't hold it against me. She continued to be a wonderful sponsor and influence in my life. So after I left, I was driving home, and at that moment, I felt lighter and freer than I ever had. Why was that? If I'd already confessed to God, if I already knew these things myself, what was so powerful about sharing it with another person? And I think it really boils down to deep needs that we have, that we're created with. We have a need to be seen and to be known and to be loved. And as long as we're hiding that from the rest of the world, oftentimes we don't actually experience that deeper knowing. Because deep down, what we're thinking is, if you really knew everything about me, then how would you see me? Then what would you think about me? But in this case, I got to actually experience the other side of that, and it was freeing. So I want to encourage you. In this step, you're going to take 3 separate situations. You're going to take time one-on-one with God to share your inventory. You're going to take time one-on-one with yourself to share your inventory, and then you're going to take time one-on-one with another person to share your inventory. So by the time you're done, you're going to actually have shared your inventory 3 different times, and each one will be a different experience, and each one will bless you in a different way. But what's the goal of doing this? Well, we're practicing the muscle of confession. So we are confessing these things out loud, and because God created us to be a whole person, not just spiritual, not just mental, not just emotional, not just physical, but a whole being, then we not only need to confess in our hearts, but we need to confess with our mouths. So when we do that, when we say these things out loud, we actually grow further and further down the road of overcoming them, which is what we want to do. So this step can be transformational, it can be healing, and it can be powerful, but it does take courage. And I want to encourage you right now, because the goal of these steps, the goal of all of the steps is peace. It's restoration. So we are actively and have been through steps 1, 2, and 3, working on restoring our relationship with God. And then 4, 5, and 6, and 7 are about restoring our relationship with ourselves. So an important part of this is that as you move through these things, you actually start to experience more of an internal peace with yourself. You're doing business with yourself. And as you do that, it's going to lead you further into this next step, which is having the courage to look at our character defects and no longer be identified with them, but be ready and willing to turn them over to God. So we'll talk about that in our next video.